plans got canceled tonight. Or maybe you canceled them. Either way, you're here. Alone. And something happened in the first 10 minutes of that aloneness that you never quite know how to explain to people. Your shoulders came down. Your breathing changed. Something that had been slightly tight all day just released. And it wasn't relief that nothing bad happened. It was something more specific than that. It was the relief of not having to be anything for anyone. Not having to track how you're coming across. Not having to manage the energy of the room or fill the silences or perform being fine when you're somewhere in the middle of fine. Just nothing. Just you. And you know what you do with that feeling? You hide it. Because if you told the truth, if you said the canceled plans were the best part of your week, people would worry about you. They'd ask if you were okay. They'd say you need to get out more. And you'd smile and nod because the explanation is longer than the conversation deserves. So you keep it to yourself, the way you keep a lot of things. Here's what I want to talk about today. Not whether solitude is healthy or unhealthy. That debate has been had. What I want to talk about is what's actually happening inside people who don't just tolerate being alone, but genuinely, deeply, specifically prefer it. What's in the neuroscience? What's in the history? And why the world keeps treating it like a problem to solve, when for some people it is, without question, the most honest way they know how to live. There are two things equally true about you if solitude is your natural state. Your inner world is richer and more alive than most people's outer world. And you have spent years apologizing for that, editing it, performing a more social version of yourself in rooms that made no room for the real one. You have something genuinely rare, and the cost of having it has been a quiet, persistent pressure to be different than you are. That's the gift and the burden, and both of them are real. Let's go back to where this started, further than last week, all the way back. You're somewhere between 8 and 12 years old. There's a version of Saturday you remember, not the busy kind with family obligations or birthday parties you had to attend. The other kind. The rare, accidentally empty Saturday where nobody had plans and nobody needed anything from you. You found a corner, a book, or just a thought you'd been following for days. Sunlight through a particular window. The specific silence of a house that wasn't asking anything of you. And you were more yourself in that silence than you were anywhere else that week. Maybe anywhere else that year. You didn't call it anything then. You just knew it felt like breathing properly. Psychologist Elaine Aron at Stony Brook University spent decades studying what she called sensory processing sensitivity, the neurological trait present in roughly 20% of the population where the brain processes incoming information, sensory, social, emotional, at a significantly deeper level than average. Not more emotionally fragile, more deeply processing. The distinction is critical. Every conversation you have, your brain isn't skimming it. It's reading it like a document. Every room you walk into, your nervous system isn't registering it as background. It's filing every signal, every tension, every unspoken thing. That takes an enormous amount of bandwidth. And the only way to reclaim that bandwidth after a day of running it at full capacity is to remove the inputs entirely. Solitude isn't where you go to recover from something that went wrong. It's where you go to process the extraordinary amount that went right. Here's something worth sitting with for a moment. A study by psychologist Reed Larson at the University of Illinois followed people over extended periods, tracking their mood in solitude versus social settings. What he found was that for people who actively chose solitude rather than having it imposed on them, time alone was consistently associated with improved mood, increased clarity, and higher quality engagement when they returned to others. The key word is chosen. Forced isolation depletes. Chosen solitude restores. And the person who keeps choosing the quiet corner isn't hiding from life. They're preparing for it. There's a term for what happens neurologically when people like you engage with the world. Dual fluency. The ability to be fully present in a social environment while simultaneously running a second, deeper process. Analysis, emotional tracking, internal synthesis. You're in the conversation and observing it at the same time. You're engaged with the person and also registering everything they're not saying. That's not a superpower with an off switch. It's a constant parallel process that runs whether you want it to or not. And the cognitive cost of running it all day, in every meeting, every social situation, every crowded space, that cost is real. And solitude is how it gets paid. This is why your small circle isn't a failure of connection. It's the only sustainable form of it. Shallow interactions don't cost much for most people. For you, they cost the same as deep ones. So you stop accepting invitations to conversations that won't go anywhere real. Not because you're antisocial, because the economics don't make sense. And if you've always known this but spent years thinking something was wrong with you for knowing it, that's exactly why we're here every week. Subscribe. This is the kind of thing we come back to again and again. Now here's the part that most videos about this completely skip, the honest part. Solitude can also be armor. And armor looks identical to restoration until you've been wearing it long enough that you've forgotten the difference. There is a version of choosing solitude that comes from fullness, from having a rich inner world that genuinely sustains you. And there's a version that comes from fear, from the accumulated evidence that closeness carries risk, that being known leads to being hurt, that the safest thing you can do is stay where no one can reach you. Both versions spend Saturday nights in the same quiet room, but one wakes up rested and one wakes up slightly more defended than the day before. Only you know which one is operating in you right now, and it's worth being honest about, because solitude as restoration is one of the healthiest things a sensitive person can give themselves. And solitude as permanent retreat is something else, something that costs you the very connections that your capacity for depth was built to make. The people who navigate this best aren't the ones who never need anyone. They're the ones who go inward and come back, who protect their quiet fiercely and offer their presence intentionally, who have one or two people in their lives who know what it means to get in. Not because they lowered their standards, because they found someone worth the cost of letting them see the real version. That's what all the solitude is quietly protecting. Not nothing, everything. The capacity to love with that level of depth, to be that fully present with the people who earn it, that doesn't exist in people who've been spreading themselves thin across every social situation the world asks of them. It exists in people who spent years in their own company, getting to know themselves well enough that when they finally show up for someone, there's something real to show up with. That's the thing nobody names, and it's the most important thing. If you felt seen somewhere in this, subscribe. There's more where this came from every single week. And now the part I most needed to say. You have been told you're too in your head, too quiet, that you'd be happier if you just put yourself out there more, that the life you're living, the internal one, the one that runs deep and moves slowly and finds meaning in things most people walk straight past, is somehow less than the loud version. You've been made to feel like your preference for your own company is a consolation prize, a symptom of something that hasn't healed yet. So let me say this as plainly as I can. Your inner world is not a consolation prize. It is not what you settled for when the social life didn't work out. It is a genuinely rich, deeply specific, carefully built place that has been sustaining you for your entire life, through every room that was too loud, every crowd that was too much, every conversation that went nowhere near deep enough for what your brain was ready to give it. You are not broken for needing the quiet. You are not damaged for preferring your own company. You are not missing out on a life that would have suited you better. You are living the one that fits, quietly, completely, without needing to announce it. The world will keep celebrating the people who fill every room they enter, and you will keep knowing something those people rarely stop long enough to discover. What it sounds like when the room is finally still and you can hear yourself think. That kind of knowing doesn't come from being around people. It comes from being, finally, alone enough to be completely, honestly yourself. And a person who knows themselves that well is never truly alone in the ways that matter.